Hey everybody, I know I had planned on doing a Facebook Live, but it just was not working out the way I was hoping. So I'm just gonna record my story and upload it for everybody. Um, with this recording, I'm not trying to expose anyone. That is not my intention. But I do plan on being very vulnerable and very transparent. And when I tell my story, it's from the point of view of how I see my story after my personal encounter with God. Like once I began to walk with God, He began to reveal some things about my life that I hadn't realized. And so I can see my life from a different perspective from this point. It doesn't seem as much as being victimized as it does seem purposeful for me. So one of the things that I remember God revealing to me was I used to always tell my story to myself, or when I would tell other people my story, I would always start at the point of when I was first molested. But then God revealed to me, like, no, the enemy started to work on you before then. So one thing I definitely want to say is we as parents and adults, we have to be mindful that the enemy is not waiting to start attacking us or our children, because he definitely started attacking me before I was even could even realize that I was being attacked. I know for sure the first attack on my life was in the womb. And it was one of those situations where a doctor completely dismissed my mother's concerns. She was saying she was in pain, and the doctor literally looked at her and told her to calm down. My mother had already had 2 natural births, so she knew what it felt like to have a child, but she was dismissed. And hours later, an intern came to check in on her, and I guess my mother looked flush, and so the intern lifted the sheet and saw that she was hemorrhaging. Her uterus had ruptured and she was bleeding to death, and I was drowning in her blood. So that was the enemy's first attack. But the thing that God revealed to me, and it made sense, was that the enemy had been attacking my mind as young as 3. I used to be very sad. I didn't have the word depressed in my vocabulary at that point, but I knew I was very sad. I knew I felt alone. I felt like nobody cared about me, and there was no reason for me to feel like that, because in all honesty, I had all the attention a lot of the time. And so the enemy was just working on my mind, and with him working on my mind, it made me very withdrawn. It made me very quiet. It made me not want to call attention to myself, which pretty much made me a prime target to be victimized. And soon I was. When I was 4 years old, that's when I first was molested. And when I say I was molested, what I mean is I was not penetrated with a penis anally or vaginally. I was forced to perform oral sex on someone, and then this person would perform oral sex on me. But my situation was a little different, because in most cases an abuser wants to victimize in secret, but this person abused me in front of 2 other people, and then when he would perform oral sex on me, he would do it in front of one of them, like he was teaching him how to do it. And so I felt humiliated. It made me feel so out of place. Like I really felt like something was wrong. And I remember when I would try to hide, they would find me for him, knowing what was about to take place. And they would sit and laugh while it was happening. And it crushed me. Like, my spirit was crushed. And like, I was pretty much silenced. I didn't really, the only time I ever said anything, I remember I used to throw temper tantrums and beg and plead not to come visit. And that was completely out of character. But my mother could not understand why I was acting that way. And she would try to figure out what she could just based off of how I was acting, because I could not tell her. Like, I couldn't find the words. I couldn't find the confidence to tell her exactly what was happening. I don't know if I was thinking that maybe they would retaliate if I told, but I just could not tell her. And so, like, this lasted for about 3 years. And then I think my abuser ended up finding God, and it just stopped. But that didn't last very long, because a little while later, someone else came in my life and began to molest me. And I remember at 6 questioning, like, what's wrong with me? Like, why does this keep happening to me? And it sent me into this dark place. Like, I started having suicidal thoughts. And I remember, in all the 31 years of my life, I've had one suicide attempt. And that was when I was 6. And though I was being abused, I was still very innocent in my mind. I was still very innocent in my thoughts. I hadn't been exposed to violence and dark stuff. So, like, I didn't think when it came to suicide to take pills or to hang myself or shoot myself or cut myself. That, like, those kind of thoughts didn't even enter my mind. Like, to think about what I came up with now, it's almost laughable, but you could tell it came out of the mind of a 6-year-old. I remember the street we lived on used to be pretty popping, so on the weekend, of course, everybody drinking, they smoking, they having a good time. And like, the adults in my family, they all went to an older cousin's house and they were playing dominoes and cards, and all the kids were at our house. And like, at the head of the street, that's where everybody was, in their garages, sitting in their cars, playing their music, getting lit. And then they would swing down the street, blasting their music. And so that day, it was about 6 o'clock in the evening, and so it's starting to get dark. And I remember saying, like, okay, if I laid my body on the grass and have my head laying off the curb into the street, one and all will probably come down the street swinging and not see me and crush me, and I'm gonna die. And so, I mean, this is what I came up with, and I proceeded to do just that. I laid down, I had my head laying in the street, and I was looking up at the sky, and I could see this car approaching. And he slowed down, and he stopped once he was about parallel. His body was about parallel with my head. And I remember kind of looking over my shoulder as he spoke to me, and he said, baby girl, get up from there. That's not how you want to go. And I jumped up crying and ran in the house. Now, as a kid, I just looked at it like it was an adult telling me what to do. But now, of course, I can see that it was God. It was him speaking to me. I mean, I didn't know that man. That man didn't know me. He had no idea what I was going through. But yet, he spoke to exactly what I was going through. Now, when it came to the abuse, I was being abused very regularly. But God was still very graceful and merciful to me at that time, because I had a phenomenal teacher. And that's about the one name that I'll say on this video, and her name was Ginger Charbonnier. My first grade teacher, she was phenomenal. I have yet to meet another teacher like her. And I mean, she showed me the love of God. She loved on me. And I know it was God now, because the timing was impeccable for this woman to come in my life. She gave me a love of learning. She made me love school. I mean, I was the kid that if I missed the bus, I knew we didn't have a car at the time. So if I missed the bus, I missed school, and I was gonna cry and throw a fit. I mean, I loved school. School was my safe haven. So God, though I was going through all this stuff at home, God also gave me this place of peace. And so, like, my whole life wasn't completely in turmoil. But I was being abused very regularly, almost daily. And it was happening so consistently to whenever it slowed down or it wasn't happening, I began to seek it out. And so I was becoming just as sick as my abuser. And I remember one time threatening to tell, and they threw a sharpened pencil at my head, and the lead penetrated my skin, and the blood began to run down my face. And I never said anything ever again for years. But once again, the abuse was happening, and I was seeking it out. I was becoming a willing participant. And soon, like, one of the worst things that could happen at that point happened. Someone who had discovered pornography decided to share it with me. And I still remember that day very vividly. But it messed me up, because I had already been physically stimulated, and now I have this visual stimulation, and it turned into a monster. And I'm like, no one can tell me that there isn't a spirit on pornography, because I feel like once pornography came into my life, all these bad behaviors like manifested. Like, it just came out of like I said, it was horrible. I began to lie all the time, and I was a very good liar. And I was an extremely good student, and I was very well behaved, so no one ever suspected me of anything. So whenever I lied, everybody believed whatever I said. I became a thief. I became very sneaky. I'm like, because when you're being molested, you kind of learn to hide stuff. So that sneakiness made its way into other situations. And I became addicted to pornography. I began to masturbate. I began to have fantasies. And the worst part, and it's difficult for me to admit this, and this was something that my mind had suppressed, trying to protect me. But in order for me to tell the truth, I have to tell the truth. I began to molest another child. I used to fondle her breast, and I started to question my sexuality. Like, that it messed me up. It messes me up, because I feel like I probably caused her just as much pain as somebody caused me. Um, my mind was completely warped. The perversion was steady growing. And like I said, I began to wonder if I was gay. And I'm like, I didn't even know what gay was. Like, I hadn't been exposed to gay people. The only person I know of that I was exposed to that was gay was one person. And at the time, I didn't know he was gay. I just thought he was weird because he was different than the other men that I had been exposed to in my life. So it was just the enemy working on my mind. All this stuff is just monster sickness. It was so bad because, like I said, the molestation was happening all the time to the point where it still kind of blows my mind that nobody picked up on it, nobody saw it, because it was becoming blatant to me, almost reckless. And then once we moved back to Houston, the abuse kind of stopped because, you know, we were separated. And but I was still very fast. Like, I was grown. I felt like I had already been exposed to so much stuff. I felt like I knew a lot. So I acted like it. I would say all kinds of stuff. I would lie and tell boys I had done stuff and never done in my life, just because I understood that there was power in that. Like, they reacted to it, and so this was the attention that I was used to, so I understood how to get it, and that's what I did. And then around that time, you know, I started watching cable, and then we get the movie channels. And that's when I became like an expert with the remote. Like, you know, to have a child-friendly program on the last program. So you hear someone coming, you watching Cinemax, you change it, and you're watching Nickelodeon. But then, you know, I was also becoming manipulative. Like, I was trying to think ahead of everybody, outsmart everybody. And so I was like, you know, if a person is hip to what I'm doing, if they hit last, they'll see exactly what I was watching. So not only did I hit last, I would push one of the the positive or negative buttons for the channel to go up or down. So if a person was to hit last, it would go to the next channel after Nickelodeon, or the channel before Nickelodeon, and they wouldn't know what I was doing. I mean, very sneaky. And so I was just being very grown, very fast at that point, still masturbating, having very vivid fantasies. And then the enemy made another attack on my life. Freak accident, ended up rupturing my major artery, one of my major arteries, and almost bled to death. But during that time, I found out that I had ovarian cysts. And so, you know, I recover, and soon after that, my abuser comes back, and we jumped right back into what we were doing. But it started to feel wrong for me. Like, I this ain't right. Like, I like boys, and this, I can't be a willing participant in this anymore. And so I remember pushing him off of me and jumping up and running into the bathroom, locking the door, and just crying. And soon after that, everything was exposed. And to be very honest, I was not happy with how the situation was handled. I was told that this was a generational curse. Let's pray and hug it out and move on. And that's exactly what they did. And I just felt kind of bitter about it because I didn't feel like nobody really cared to really try to ask me really how I felt or what really was going on with me. Nobody did that. So in part, I felt cheated. And this spirit of lust is starting to grow on me. And so I'm still watching pornography. I remember one day the spirit being so heavy on me that it was early in the morning. It was like 6 something in the morning, and I was supposed to be getting ready for school. And I remember I couldn't get to porn. I mean, the internet wasn't really a big thing at that point just yet. Or we didn't have access to it. And so I went on the television where everyone shared this cable box and ordered pay-per-view pornography. I was that far gone that I ordered porn on the cable bill, knowing eventually the bill was gonna come. And when it did, I lied, and they believed me. But that just shows you, like, the addiction was so blatant, it didn't care. I didn't care if this ain't my money, this is wrong. I didn't care. And then not too long after that, I ended up getting really sick. My ovarian cyst ruptured, and I was in tremendous pain. I could barely walk. I couldn't eat anything. When I say I could barely walk, I was walking hunched over. Like, I couldn't stand straight up. I was losing so much weight. I mean, I was in the 8th grade, and I could fit into my sister's clothes, who was in the 4th grade. I looked skeletal. I was so weak. And so I was staying home from school. And I remember this person was like, oh, she's just trying to stay home because she want to stay home with a boy. And because I ended up overhearing that. And I kind of rolled my eyes. This person stayed home. And I remember going to get the heating pad. Now it's just me and this person in the house. I go to get the heating pad, and this person tells me that the heating pad is plugged up and I could just use it right there. And I was like, no, I'll take it in the room. And he was like, no, I'll just use it right here. So I did what I was told, and I just used the heating pad right there. And then this person looks at me and asks me if he can suck on my breast. Like, yeah, I'm sorry for being blatant about it, being very straight with what I'm saying, but I'm just trying to say it how it was. And when he asked me, I was shocked. I mean, I didn't know what to do. It's just me and this person in this house. I can't fight this man off. I can't run. I don't know what to do. So out of fear, I told this man yes. One of my biggest regrets. But to be honest, to tell my story honestly, I have to say that I said yes. Yes, I understand that this man was an adult and I was a child, but this man in his sick mind could still say that I said yes. And so he proceeded to do just that. And once he stopped, I kind of turned over and kind of slid off the bed and went into the room and went into me and my younger sister's room, and I locked the door and I stayed there until somebody else came home. And I had never planned on telling anybody what had happened because of how the first situation was handled. So I wasn't gonna say nothing. But that summer, I ended up letting it slip. And the person I let it slip to was not gonna overlook it. She made me tell an adult, and as I was telling that person, the man of the house came home and walked in as we were having that conversation. And so I had to tell him. Fast forward a few months, and just the situation hadn't been handled the way he wanted it. I remember being in 9th grade and being in school and being called to the front office, thinking I was about to get some lunch money, only to be encountered by a agent from Child Protective Services. It's insane, all the stuff that happened. I mean, this is all the way up until 9th grade. This is only to the 9th grade. And that person was forcibly removed from the house that day. And at first he was denying it, but then he failed a polygraph test and he ended up going to jail. And once he was gone, I kind of just lost my mind. Just started doing whatever I wanted to do. And I think my mom was kind of trying to find herself at the same time. So I was just doing whatever I wanted to do. I was 14 and living like I was grown. And that was at the point where I thought I was about to make an adult decision. I thought I was I was protecting me. I was being in control of what happened to me for the first time. That's how I saw it. And I decided I was gonna lose my virginity. Nobody was gonna talk me into it. Nobody was gonna pressure me. Nobody was going to take that from me. I was gonna do what I wanted to do, and I did just that. 14 years old, I lost my virginity, thinking I knew so much because I had been exposed to so much. And I had no idea. I was just opening myself up to more spirits. And fast forward almost a year, and I meet a guy that moved next door. We start talking. Soon after, sleep together. Fast forward a month, I'm pregnant. I'm 15 and pregnant. And nobody really talked about it. Nobody really wanted to look at it. I was angry with myself because while all of this is happening, I'm still a phenomenal student. I'm still doing great in school. And now I'm pregnant. And I had just saw what my sister had to go through. My sister was a teenage mom, and I knew that it wasn't easy. I knew it was difficult. And yet I did exactly the same thing. And then during the pregnancy, me and the father just fell out. Like, we stopped talking. And I remember months passed. And then we go on winter break. Me and the child's father reconnect. And then Christmas morning, 2004, I am awakened to this incredible pain. My mom calls for an ambulance. They come, and I am in full-blown labor. So they take me to the hospital, and I end up giving birth to a 13-ounce, 10-inch long little girl. I mean, they were marveling at her because she was so small. And they told me she's gonna die within the hour. There was no thought of medical intervention. That wasn't even on their minds. And so at 15, I had to come to terms with the fact that I was about to lose a baby. And I was okay. Within every hour they came to me and it was like, she's still living, she's still living, she's still living. And then hour 6, they came to me and they said, look, you have a fighter. She has been breathing on her own. I mean, baby was only 18 weeks developed, breathing on her own for 6 hours. And then she was working so hard to breathe, her lung collapsed. And that's when they decided to medically intervene. And then they transported her to Texas Children. I go to visit her. I mean, it was a weird experience because I still felt very much like a child. Like I was still ashamed that I had put myself and my parents in that situation. But then I knew this was my baby. And as time went on, they came to me and they said, you know, when her lung collapsed, the acid from her lungs came out and it's starting to shut down her other organs. Do you want to pull the plug? So at 15 years old, I had to make the decision to pull the plug on my baby. Signed the paper, they shut off the machine, and I watched as her vitals start to drop. I decided I didn't want to be there when she died, so I was like, I'm ready to go. I knew she wasn't gonna make it, but my mother was optimistic. She was like, we're gonna come back and visit her and spend the night with her. But I knew she wasn't gonna make it. I remember telling them, like, if they call this phone after we leave this hospital, do not give me the phone. And sure enough, the phone rings about 10 minutes after we leave. And she's gone. And so we go right back to the hospital. And I remember I was okay with saying my goodbyes. My mother was saying her goodbyes, and so did my stepmom. But my dad, even when she was alive, he couldn't hold her. And so at first, he was like, nah, I can't do it. And then as they were about to take her away, I remember he was like, okay. And he was holding her. I'm sorry, this is another part that gets me every time I think about it. He had her in one hand. He had her in one hand. And he went to his knee with his other hand and started to cry like a baby. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in that room. It was so intense. I had never seen my father cry before. And so that left a lasting impression on me. Part of me felt bad because I knew I had created that situation. So I was 15 years old and buried my child on New Year's Eve 2004. And most people didn't even know I was pregnant. So when school resumed, I went back to school like nothing had ever happened. I went to gym, we had a physical exam, and I participated. And as I was leaving that class, like I couldn't see straight. Like I was running into the wall, almost running into the locker. And so when I got to class, I put my head down And I remember my teacher coming in and she kind of tapped me on the back like, girl, you know I don't play that. And I was like, I can't see. And she was like, what do you mean you can't see? I said, I just had a baby and I was working out in the gym. And she looked at me like I was crazy. And she sent me to the nurse. She had someone that escort me to the nurse. And for some reason, I don't know why, but she took it upon herself to go and talk to the registrar. Because while I was pregnant, I had lost all my credits because I had missed so many days. The grades were phenomenal. It was good. But, I mean, well, the only class that my grades suffered in was Algebra 2 because, like, that's one of them classes. You miss one day, you miss a lot. But they had took away all my credits and filed truancy on me. She was able to get my credits all back, and I was able to not have to pay a fine for truancy. I was able to just do this, be like come and be in the audience for some kind of student court. And you know, Oprah has a similar story where after she lost her baby, her father was like, you know, this is your second chance. God's giving you a second chance. Take advantage of it. And she completely turned her life around. I didn't have that thought. I was still trying to fill some kind of void. And I ended up being back involved with my child's father. And that relationship was so toxic. I mean, I was so gullible and naive, and whatever this man said, I believed, even when he did wrong and I knew he was wrong. I wasn't going to go anywhere. I guess out of fear that this was going to be the only person that cared about me. Excuse me. Ran behind this man for 3 years at that point. And then, like I said, fast forward 3 years and I'm pregnant again. I had already graduated high school. I graduated about a semester early and I'm pregnant. Now, throughout those 3 years, I was still watching porn. Because honestly, I remember I used to, you know, once the internet started to be popping, I used to get on the computer, and it was like the minute your computer would get a virus, the first thing that would pop up on your computer was porn. And so that addiction took a turn, and I remember I used to get free subscriptions and then cancel them. And then once it got to the point where I couldn't get a free subscription, I started to look for cards around the house. I started to look for checkbooks. And I remember one time I actually finally found something that worked, and I put the information in and sat there and watched pornography. I mean, horribly sneaky and very nonchalant about it. And I was still masturbating, still very heavily into the fantasizing, but it wasn't as frequent as it was before I started to talk to my child's father, because I began to be with him all the time. So I wasn't always around a computer or something like that. But that relationship had me so off track. Like I said, I still did good in school. Definitely didn't do my best because my focus was on him. And then when I became pregnant the second time, I remember we weren't even together at that point, but I ended up getting pregnant. And this pregnancy, I was a little more making sure I took care of what I needed to take care of. I was going to the doctor, getting the ultrasounds, getting the fetal heartbeat checked. And I remember about 19 weeks, 6 days, no, maybe week 19, a few days into my 19th week, I noticed the baby. I didn't feel the baby moving, but I just assumed that maybe the baby had moved further back and I wasn't feeling the baby. But then a few days later, I was woken up with this intense pain, this very familiar pain. And part of me knew this was not good. So I go to the emergency room, and I remember watching this nurse desperately looking for this heartbeat. She was searching for this heartbeat with everything in her. And you know, at that point, I felt so bad for her, because in my heart, I knew that this baby was gone. And so she then went and got a portable ultrasound machine, and she looked for the heartbeat and no heartbeat. And so she then told me, you know, you miscarried, and we believe you're probably about to pass this baby. And I was. My sister, she was there, my older sister, and I felt so bad for her, because I feel like that moment traumatized her, because it was almost as if nobody really cared that I was in here and I was going through this miscarriage. She was like, I was telling her, like, I can feel it coming, and nobody was there. So she was yelling like, she's about to pass this baby, like, is somebody gonna come in here? And they came. I passed the baby. They took it. They cleaned me out. And I mean, when I say they were rough, they were rough. I think gave me like some Tylenol or something and sent me home. And after I lost that baby, I became obsessed with pregnancy. And when I say I was obsessed, I was obsessed. My television stayed on Discovery Health Channel and TLC, because I was watching everything baby. And then I ended up going into a very deep, my darkest depression. I didn't care about nobody. I didn't care about nothing. I didn't care about how nobody felt. I didn't care if people were dependent on me. I didn't care about nothing. And so I kind of stopped staying with my mom at that point. I was staying with my child's father's family. And that's when I started smoking weed heavily. I was smoking weed from the time I woke up to the time I went to sleep. I stayed high. I just did not care anymore. Like, had I died at that point, I wouldn't have cared. I just didn't see the point of living if I was going to keep going through that stuff. I'm like, with all the stuff I had already gone through, like, this is another burden I have to carry as well. And you wouldn't believe it, 3.5 months later, after losing the second pregnancy, I was pregnant again. I was pregnant again. And all these pregnancies are about the same person, might I add, but I was pregnant again. And part of me believes that it was God's infinite wisdom, knowing that this is going to be the only thing that pulls this girl out of what she's going through right now. So I get pregnant. And I immediately remember an episode of Birthday that I had watched on Discovery Health Channel, where a woman was experiencing what I had gone through. Like, she kept having miscarriages. She was going into preterm labor and losing her babies. And then she had this surgery done. And so as soon as I went in, I was like, look, I need this surgery. And so they said they could do it. And it was at that moment that I knew I was gonna have this child, like this child was gonna survive. And so I went in for the surgery. And then I immediately knew I can't stay in the environment that I'm in right now. I can't. Now, hold on. I wanna bring up an incident that happened while I was in that depression to show just how I was at a point where the enemy was having his way with me. I remember showing up to my mother's house high as a kite. I was super high. And I was in there laughing and acting like I didn't care. And I remember them looking at me like, who is this? Like, this is not Jamisha. Like, I cannot believe she is over here acting like this. But I didn't care. And so once I'm pregnant with this child, I'm not going to say the pregnancy was completely smooth, because I did have a stint in the hospital because I ended up starting to bleed. I was in the hospital for about a week and then released. And then I carried this little girl to term and gave birth to my daughter. And today she's 11 years old, soon to be 12. Now, that little girl saved my life. That was when my life first took a shift. And like, I didn't have time to indulge in watching pornography and fantasizing and all that. So a lot of that took the back seat to me being a mother, and also helping my sister with my nephews. But as my child got older, it was like this spirit of lust and like a seductive spirit started to rise up. And I remember I used to, like, I had it down to a science. Like, if I decided I liked somebody or I was interested in somebody, I would go after them. And it was like I had this formula to use, and I would do it, and it never failed. Every time I used it, it worked. And so I was definitely working in that spirit. And yeah, it was very strong. And then fast forward about a year, and my daughter was about 2 years old. Yeah, she was about, no, she was 3. And I remember it was New Year's Eve, 2011, and my mom, I had never seen her watching Bishop T.D. Jakes, never in my life. I've seen her watch many other ministers, but Bishop T.D. Jakes was not one of them. But that night she had the channel, was on the Word channel, and she had turned off all the lights in the house, and the only thing that was giving light to the living room was the television. And my mother had a 65-inch television at that time. And so the whole living room was completely lit up by the television. And I just came in the living room just to come in the living room. And I sat here on the couch, and next thing I know, I started to feel this pull. God was drawing me in, and I began to cry, and I surrendered my life. And after that, it was like I was trying to walk in obedience. I was trying to do everything he was telling me to do. I was trying to really hear him. And it sounds crazy, but I remember it was like March 10th or something like that. And I remember being woken up, and that day my room was abnormally bright. And I remember the spirit saying, wake up, get on your computer and go to the Disney website. I'm like, okay. And so for anyone who really knows me, they know I can be very animated with my vocals. So I'm thinking maybe I'm about to look for some voiceover acting or something like that. So I'm searching and going from page to page to page, and I'm not finding anything. And I'm like, God, like, what you got me doing? And then I come across the Disney College Program application. I ignored it and I just kept on going. And then the spirit said, no, go back. So I go back. He said, look at the date. And it was March 9th on there. And it said, like, they had just barely reposted the application. So he said, fill it out. So I began to fill it out, but questioned it the whole time. Like, why am I doing this? Like, what would I do this for? I mean, because at this point, I'm in school. Because I had did so well in school, I was an automatic admission to the University of Houston at the main campus. So I'm like, I would see those posters around school, and I was like, who would do that? Like, who would do that? But I continued to fill out the application. And then I took my laptop and I sat in the living room and I was talking to my little sister through her door. And I was like, why would I even do this? Like, I have a whole child. Like, I can't do this. And like, the minute it came out my mouth, she responded like, if you get accepted, I will keep her. And I was like, what? Like, girl, stop. She's like, I'm serious. So I continued to fill out the application. And then I'm like, and then once I get to the end, I realized it says, like, if you get accepted, there's a fee you have to pay. And, you know, you have to get there yourself. And she was like, I'll pay for it. And I was like, girl, I'm not finna let you pay for this. And she was like, Jamisha, you bought me a car. And I was like, I bought you a car? And she was like, yeah, you gave me the money to buy the car. And so I was like, oh my God, I did do that, huh? I wasn't trying to be, you know, have this false humility. It was honest. Like, I literally had forgot that I had done it. And she did just that. She paid for my flight, she booked me a hotel, and she kept my child. And so when I was going to Disney, I was very sure that God was sending me to teach me something. I was there to learn something, because I knew this wasn't a desire that I had to go here. And when I say God blew my mind, he took me from everything that I knew, and everything that I had attached myself to, he removed me from it and began to really show me how he saw me as an individual. Like, how he saw me, that's what he wanted me to see. He wanted me to see the favor I have on my life. And when I tell you he showed me the favor on my life, I did so many things that most college program students don't get to do. Like, there was so much favor. And yet, though God was doing all this stuff, showing me how he felt about me, this spirit of lust is right there with it. It wasn't very long after I got there, I met someone I liked. We started talking. Like I said, I was in a seductive spirit, so I messaged this person. I waited to see how they responded, and then it was like, the spirit just took off. And soon after, I think we slept together. And so I'm like, though God is working on me and revealing all these things to me, he's building my self-esteem, he's doing all these things, I'm still very much walking in this spirit of lust. And at that point, my conviction wasn't very strong, so it wasn't heavy on me with the conviction. But like I said, he was still being so gracious to me during that time. And once the program ended and I went back home, me and that person stayed connected. And that's when I saw myself start doing things that now I can't believe I was doing. I purchased sex toys. I started to send very inappropriate pictures. I was doing extremely inappropriate stuff on video chat, and wasn't concerned, like weren't like trying to wonder like what if somebody came across. I didn't care. I was in that spirit that I was completely being led by my flesh. But then the Lord convicted me, and I threw away all my sex toys. And I then went to visit my best friend in her home in Niagara Falls, New York, and I loved it there. And so it was like God was working on me and telling me it was okay for me to go. And so I moved up there. I made the decision to move. I took me and my child. We moved to New York. And at that point, I was really starting to try to grow in the Word. But the thing about people in New York and people in the South, like, we have completely different attitudes. Like, in the South, we have Southern hospitality. In the North, people kind of cold. People are mean. And so for me, I go up here and I'm a person that smiles all the time. I'm a nice person. And people were kind of taken aback by it, but it also was drawing people in. And maybe for the wrong reason. And I remember this older guy. Well, hold on. I ended up working at Walmart, and at that point, I felt like I completely failed. Like, I felt like a failure. Like, I couldn't believe that I was working at Walmart. Like, with everything that I knew, I felt like I was capable of, with all the potential I thought I had. I could not believe that I was working at Walmart. But I had to do what I had to do. And so this older guy begins to kind of pursue me. But then I met this other guy that I really liked. And so I started talking to this guy. But he can't make up his mind on what he wants to do. So we're on and we're off. We're on and we're off. We're on and we're off. And then we're on and then we sleep together. And then we're off again. And so in that time, I stopped talking. We stopped talking. This other guy, the older guy, was pursuing me. I'm like, he's a minister. I mean, so I'm like, I'm trying to grow in my faith. I'm trying to grow in my walk. And I'm like, maybe he can help me in my walk. And so we started talking, and soon I realized he is full of lust. And I'm like, oh, like, what? Like, really? Like, you too? I'm like, I know he full of lust, but then I'm like, what does that say about me? Like, that's the spirit that I'm drawing. Obviously, I'm exuding an energy I don't even realize that I'm exuding. And so me and him decide to like, I was like, I don't want a situation that's purely based on sex. That is not what I'm after. And so we mutually decide to stop talking. And maybe a month or so after, me and the other guy get back together. Now, me and him, we had this strong spiritual connection. We talked about the Word. We were getting really heavy in our spiritual conversations. And I remember one day we were talking, sharing on the Word, and he had my Bible in his hand, and he was so excited. He was like, what about this story? Like, you know, this story, like, I found this story so fascinating. And I was like, oh, I'm not familiar. And he was like, what about this one? I was like, don't know. He's like, what about this one? And I was like, don't know it. And he did to me what probably is one of the best things I think anybody could have ever done for me. And he called me out and he looked at me. He was like, man, do you even read your Bible? And I was like, convicted? No. The only time I would really read my Bible is when I was like following along with a minister, watching a YouTube video. But to really pick up the word and really try to get into it for myself, I had not done. And so I was convicted, and that's when I really started trying to do better. And so, but I'm like, I'm in this relationship and we're both full of lust. And so there were times when I would get the feeling like I really need to stop having sex with him. Like, we really need to stop sleeping with each other. And I remember like going to him to tell him, like, I think we should stop having sex. And he was like, that's not what you want to do. And instead of recognizing that, okay, you're gonna get in the way of my walk, I rather pleased him than be obedient to God and his word. And we continued to sleep together. But after that, it was like the relationship became very volatile. Like, we couldn't get along. We were always arguing. And I was baffled. Like, oh my God, it went from being really good to being insane all the time. And then soon after, my spirit just was uneasy and I decided to move back to Houston. But me and him stayed in contact. We were still together. We decided to have a long distance relationship. But as time went on, he started to kind of push off. And that's when I guess started to feel neglected, and I bought a sex toy and I started to masturbate again. I started watching porn again. And it was like I was slowly backsliding, just getting away from my beliefs. And then this guy at work started paying attention to me, and I entertained him. Though we never slept together, our encounters were very lustful. And I remember as time went on, I remember like my boyfriend, he didn't reach out to me for my birthday. And so I reached out and I said something. I said, like, I let him know, like, are you serious? And of course he said, yeah. Man, it is what it is. Like, okay. And so I remember praying, like, God, please remove anything and anyone that is keeping me from you, that is distracting me from you. Please remove it. Now, I'm like, I had said this prayer before, but I guess it was something about the sincerity of this prayer that God responded to, because the next thing I know, me and this man are not speaking at all. And then when the other guy reached out to me, I was like, look, if you're gonna come at me like that, like, you can stop contacting me. So that communication ended. And then God began to really do a work in me. Like, he had me stop watching certain things. He had me stop listening to certain things. So I was being very, very particular about what I allowed into my eye and ear gates. Like, I was being very particular. And I was getting heavy in my word. And God told me to go on my first fast. Like, I had never fasted in my life. And I did a water only fast, and I lasted for 6.5 days. And I mean, that season of my life, I never felt so powerful, even to now. Like, that was the most powerful season of my life. I was hungry for the word. I was thirsting after it. I was hungry. I was on fire. I went through the New Testament so fast that it shocked me. And because I had went on the fast, I had started eating healthy, so I lost like 35 pounds in like 3 months, if that long. And then, you know, I just was doing very well. Like, at that point, I didn't have no problems. Like, I didn't feel like I was being run by lust. I didn't feel like, I didn't have a desire to watch pornography. None of that was there at that point. But slowly I was as like month 4 passed after my fast, my discipline was starting to wane, and I remember I get a call or I get a message out of nowhere from my ex. And in that message, he ended up telling me that he no longer lived in Niagara Falls. So I was like, I had already been thinking that we were going to return to Niagara Falls, and now he's telling me he ain't there, so I ain't got to deal with that. I think it's time to go. So me and my daughter, we moved back. And I get a new job, and I'm doing good. And then God throws a test my way. He sends this person around me, and this spirit of lust rises up very strong. And I was like, oh no, I haven't had sex. I haven't been doing none of that. I said, like, I was trying to fight it, but then I let my flesh win. Like, in my mind, like, I definitely fell in my mind. I didn't sleep with this person, but I fell in my mind. And then about a month or so passed, and my ex pop up. I'm back here. I'm back in Niagara Falls. Do you live in Niagara Falls? I'm like, yeah, I want to see you. So we see each other as friends. Nothing wrong. Second time, I fall. And I wanted to blame him. I was like, I was doing good until you came around me. And then God was like, no, it's not him. That's you. That's what's in you. I was trying to show you what was still in you. Something that you thought you had conquered. Something that you felt like you had power over. But the only thing that really was keeping you from falling was the opportunity. The minute the opportunity, appeared, you failed. And I had to look at that, and I continued to be involved with my ex. And soon, I was making silly decisions, and then it all blew up in my face. And then God was looking at me like I heard him say, like, this is what I was trying to protect you from. But he was still graceful. He still was merciful, and he allowed it to not be as serious as what I thought. And at the time, my daughter, she ended up getting very depressed. Like, her whole demeanor had changed. Everybody could see that something was wrong with her. And so I made the decision to send her back to Houston. And once I sent her back, there wasn't a doubt in my mind that I was going to return to Houston, because I wasn't going to be without my child. And once she was back in Houston, it was like it went back to normal. And so I knew there was just a countdown for me to return back to Houston. And when I did, I know for sure it was absolutely God. Like, I made the right decision, because as soon as I got there, as soon as I got back here, last minute, I was able to sign up for Sarah Jake Roberts' Night in a While. And I ended up having to go by myself, because when I went back to buy tickets for my sisters, sold out. So that was out of my comfort zone, just having to go by myself. But I did. I received the word. I mean, she spoke to me. She inspired me. And then I was able to go to see, have a VIP to see Jonathan McReynolds. And I went to that concert, and it was phenomenal. Like the spirit, the worship was so amazing. Like, I was like, this is how it should be. Like, everybody praising, everybody worshiping, everybody being on one accord. The energy, I can't explain what that felt like. But the third thing that year is which was last year, the third thing that happened that was absolutely the blessing was me being involved in the Leading Ladies program, a program where we're working to step into who God called us to be. We're refining our skills in leadership and in ministry, in sisterhood, to be the women that God called us to be. But the best part for me was the program inside the program. And that was Kept Life. Because Kept Life is a program where you're working out your purity. And in that program, you really have to acknowledge what's going on with you. So that was the first time in my life I really looked at myself and really had to dig and acknowledge the spiritual part of sex. And when you realize how spiritual sex is, it's so many ways you allow spirits into your life. And like when it came like to the seductress spirit, like to me that's like the enemy was getting 2 for 1, because not only does he have me bound, I'm about to make someone else fall. So I'm like, I had to acknowledge that there were times when I was willfully and proudly walking in that spirit, like being used of the enemy. And I had to accept it. I had to face it. I had to call it out. I had to ask for forgiveness. I had to repent. I had to forgive. I had to really acknowledge just how messed up I was. Because for a long time I thought I was good because I was able to talk about it. I was able to help other people. But this spirit was still very heavy on me. I wasn't dealing with it. I wasn't calling myself out. And at that point, I called myself out. And up until this day, you know, I am still on my purity walk. And not to say it's been perfect, because no, I have definitely fallen in the area of pornography and masturbation and fantasizing. But the difference now is I catch it. I don't allow thoughts to stay too long. And when I do fall, I renounce it. I repent. I ask God for forgiveness. I check myself. If I ever feel like or think I'm moving in the spirit of lust, I call myself on it. I ask God, like if I ever feel like a spirit is rising in me, I ask God for his help, knowing that in my weakness, his strength is made perfect. Like I really I'm leaning into God now. Like I'm really understanding, like I cannot do this without him. For so long, I was trying to fight this battle without him. I was trying to be strong, thinking like, okay, if I say I'm not gonna do it, and I know I really don't want to do this, I'm not gonna do it. And I failed so many times. So now, you know, I'm really pressing in to God and trusting that his way is honestly the best way. His way is protection. And so I am very much more mindful these days of what I do and how I do it. And I felt it was necessary for me to make this video because I feel like molestation does not get talked about enough. And it absolutely does not get talked about on the level of how it affects someone. And I know people don't get it because there have been things said to me by people I really care about. Like they had things to say about some of the things that I did not understanding that the things that I did were very much connected to the fact that I was molested, and that was the way these things were manifesting in my life. I mean, they said some very hurtful stuff, so it let me know they really don't understand the trauma that I've already gone through. And so I felt like it was necessary for me to show the progression. Like most of the bad decisions that I made are connected to being molested. And I think people have to understand, like, I know there are cases where people went even darker than what I went into. That is not lost on me, but that's not my testimony. God, somebody was praying for me. God graced me and he kept me, and I was able to come up out of it. It didn't kill me. I didn't die. I know there are some people that went through what I went through that gave up, that I've heard of stories where people committing suicide. I've heard people that literally have lost their minds. They're addicted to drugs, and God kept me. And so I want people to know that this stuff is real. It is something that we cannot keep sweeping under the rug. It is something that we have to be mindful of, because it invades every area of your life. Like, it invades every area of your life. I knew when I was younger, once I was molested, that something changed in me. I knew that I was forever changed. I knew that something was taken from me. I can't say that today I'm the same person that I would have been had I not been molested. But God has graced me to be vulnerable and open about what I went through. And now I understand, like, it's a ministry. And though I absolutely never thought I'd be doing this, it brings me joy to do it, because I believe my story gives glory to God. It shows his glory. It shows his love. It shows his truth. It shows his comfort. It shows his compassion. It shows his masterfulness. Like, everything that he did, the way he was able to take my brokenness and create the woman that I am today, it is mind-blowing. But I feel like we need to give people the chance. And I just wanted to make sure when I shared my story, I didn't, especially as a believer, because I believe we do a disservice to people that are coming into the knowledge of God by not actually showing and sharing our struggles that we still have after we get saved. Because people think they're going to get God and everything is going to magically go away. They're going to magically just be good and be okay. And no, it's the battle. I still battle today. I just want people to know that this is real. And I know it's actually very pervasive. I know this happens more than people want to admit, but I felt it was necessary for me to talk about it, especially from a woman's point of view, because I feel like we rarely get to hear about women after they've been molested, especially a woman that was dealing with pornography. But you have to deal. Like, you have to look at it. You cannot heal if you're not willing to look at it. And so I hope that by me sharing my story, it gives someone else hope and allows them to break free and get some kind of, encouragement, motivation to do the work, to come out of that, because I know how bound it can have you. And like, I want everyone to be free, just like your God wants you to be free. And freedom is there for you, but you have to be willing to take it You have to be willing to go into the places that you don't want to look at because it hurts. But I dare you to do it. I dare you to love yourself. Love yourself enough to heal. Because the fact that you made it through, your life is a living testimony. And somebody needs to hear you. I love y'all. I hope this video does exactly what I'm intending for it to do. I am here to talk if anybody needs to talk. And if anybody has questions, I am open to answer them. I love y'all, and I hope y'all have an amazing day.